The Adeyemi mansion was built to impress. Marble floors that shone like mirrors, chandeliers that spilled light like waterfalls, and rooms so vast they seemed carved out of silence itself. From the gate to the gardens, every detail screamed of wealth, power, and a family that had long forgotten what it meant to struggle. Yet, in the shadows of all this luxury lived a girl who carried the weight of humiliation like a cloak she could never remove. Her name was Amara. She had come to the Adeyemis not out of choice, but necessity. Poverty had pressed against her family like a storm that never passed. Her father was gone, her mother broken by years of illness, and her younger siblings hungry more often than full. When the offer came to work as a maid for one of the wealthiest families in Lagos, she accepted, telling herself it was just a job. She did not know she was walking into a cage built not of iron bars but of cruelty. From the first day, she was treated not as a human being but as dirt beneath the family's shoes. The madam of the house, Mrs. Adeyemi, carried herself like royalty, demanding obedience at the snap of her fingers. She shouted at Amara for the smallest mistakes, a glass not polished enough, a meal served 1 minute too late, a wrinkle in the curtains she had ironed. Sometimes her scolding came with a slap, sharp and quick, followed by words that stung worse than the blow, "Useless girl. You eat food you don't deserve." The children, spoiled by wealth and shielded from kindness, mimicked their mother's contempt. They mocked Amara's accent, laughed at her worn shoes, and once poured water on the floor just to watch her scramble to clean it while they laughed. To them, she was entertainment, a reminder that some people existed only to serve. And then there was Chief Adeyemi, the master of the house. He was a man of influence, known in politics and business circles, with a belly full of rich meals and a voice that filled every room he entered. To him, Amara was invisible. She was the one who cleared his plates, ironed his agbatas, polished his shoes until she could see her reflection. He rarely acknowledged her presence, except to bark an order or accuse her of laziness. Yet, in his silence and arrogance, Amara sensed something else. A man who carried secrets, a man who locked doors and whispered into phones when he thought no one was listening. But for now, secrets were the last thing on Amara's mind. Her days were filled with endless tasks. Before the sun rose, she was awake, scrubbing the marble floors on her knees until her fingers burned. She cooked elaborate meals she was never allowed to taste, washing plates until her skin cracked from detergent. While the Adeyemis feasted at the grand dining table, Amara ate scraps in the corner of the kitchen, swallowing food that was cold and left over. Sometimes she wasn't fed at all. At night, when the family slept on silk sheets, Amara curled up on a thin mattress in a cramped servants' quarters near the back of the house. The walls were damp, the fan barely worked, and mosquitoes sang in her ears until morning. Sleep came in fragments, often interrupted by a call from the madam demanding she fetch water, or the children banging on her door for fun. Humiliation became her daily bread. Each insult, each slap, each reminder of her place beneath them dug into her heart like thorns. And yet, she endured. She endured because she had no choice. She endured because her siblings at home depended on the little money she sent each month. She endured because leaving meant returning to hunger, and hunger had already stolen too much from her family. Still, Amara was not blind. She noticed things. She noticed how Chief Adeyemi often came home late, his clothes smelling of perfume that was not his wife's. She noticed how he locked his study and slipped the key into his breast pocket like a man hiding treasure. She noticed the arguments between him and his wife, arguments muffled by closed doors but betrayed by the tension that filled the air during dinner. She noticed, and she remembered. One evening, while cleaning the study, she found herself staring at the shelves lined with books and files. The room smelled of leather and expensive cigars, heavy with the presence of its owner. She dusted the desk carefully, her eyes catching the faint outline of an envelope tucked beneath a stack of papers. She hesitated. She knew she should not touch it. Curiosity, however, was a flame she could not smother. She pulled the envelope free. It was thick, marked in bold letters, "Private." Her hands trembled as she slid it open, careful not to leave a trace. Inside was a small flash drive. Harmless, ordinary, yet its careful concealment made it seem dangerous. Amara held it for a moment, her heart racing. She didn't know what it contained, but instinct told her it was more than just files. It was something her master didn't want anyone to see. Something hidden. Something powerful. A sudden sound startled her, the creak of footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, she slid the flash drive back into the envelope, tucked it beneath the papers, and resumed dusting. Chief Adeyemi entered moments later, his heavy presence filling the room. He barely looked at her, brushing past as though she were part of the furniture. But Amara's pulse did not settle. For the first time since entering this house, she held a thread of something more than humiliation. A thread of possibility. That night, as she lay awake in her narrow bed, she could not stop thinking about the flash drive. What secrets did it hold? Why was it hidden so carefully? And most importantly, could it be her way out? Amara did not yet know the full power of what she had stumbled upon. She did not yet see the storm she was about to unleash. But deep inside, something had shifted. For years, she had swallowed insults and pain in silence. For years, she had bent under the weight of servitude. But now, for the first time, she carried a secret. A secret that could shatter the walls of the mansion she served in. And as the moonlight spilled across her small room, she whispered to herself, not words of revenge, not yet, but a vow. A vow that she would no longer be powerless. Because in the grand house of the Adeyemis, power was the only language spoken. And Amara had just discovered her first word. The next morning, as she carried breakfast into the dining room, Chief Adeyemi's eyes met hers. For the briefest second, Amara thought she saw something in his gaze, not contempt, not dismissal, but suspicion. It was as if he sensed she had seen too much. And in that silent exchange, the war began. Suspicion. It was only a flicker, a passing shadow across Chief Adeyemi's eyes, but it left Amara unsettled. That morning, as she placed the steaming tray of yam porridge and peppered fish before him, he watched her too closely. His wife barked at her to fetch more juice, the children laughed and spilled food across the polished table, yet all Amara felt was the weight of his gaze. It was the look of a man who feared exposure. And in that moment, she knew what she had found in his study was more dangerous than she imagined. But danger was not new to Amara. Poverty had been danger. Hunger had been danger. Even this house, with its cruel insults and sharp slaps, had been danger. What frightened her more was the thought of living her whole life like this, bent, silent, erased. No. She could not. Not anymore. That evening, when the family retired upstairs, Amara slipped back into the study. She moved quickly, every step measured, her ears straining for sound. The flash drive was still where she had left it, tucked neatly under papers. With trembling fingers, she slid it into the pocket of her worn dress and carried it out with her like stolen fire. In the cramped servants' quarters, she stared at it in the glow of a dim bulb. She had no computer, no means to see what it contained. But luck came in an unexpected way. The security guard, Colonel, sometimes lent her his small laptop to play music during long nights. That night, while he dozed at the gate, she asked if she could borrow it briefly. He agreed without question. Her hands shook as she inserted the flash drive. The screen flickered to life, and then, files. Dozens of them, neatly organized. Contracts, offshore bank statements, scanned passports, and photographs. Amara's eyes widened. She didn't understand every document, but she recognized fraud when she saw it. Shell companies with millions funneled through them. Property registered under fake names. Evidence of corruption so vast it could topple a man of Chief Adeyemi's stature. But that wasn't all. Buried in a folder labeled "Personal" were photographs, grainy but clear enough. Chief Adeyemi with a woman who was not his wife. The intimacy in the images left no doubt. Amara clicked further and found hotel receipts, private chats, even recordings. Her breath caught in her throat. This was not just betrayal of a wife. This was ammunition. For a long moment, Amara sat frozen, staring at the screen. She had in her hands the power to destroy the man who had treated her like dirt. She had what the madam herself did not know. She had what could collapse the entire Adeyemi dynasty. Her first instinct was fear. If he ever discovered she had seen this, he could ruin her life, or end it. Men like Chief Adeyemi did not beg. They silenced. Yet, alongside her fear grew something else. Something hotter. Anger. For every insult she had endured, for every night she went to bed hungry, for every bruise left by a careless slap, here was her weapon. The next morning, Amara carried on with her duties as though nothing had changed. She polished floors, served meals, and endured insults. But beneath her lowered gaze, she carried a new secret. A quiet smile flickered in her eyes. She was no longer powerless. At first, she said nothing. She studied him. She tested him. One evening, as she cleared the table, she mentioned softly, "Chief works very late these days. I wonder if it is the office, or something else." It was casual, almost careless. But Chief Adeyemi stiffened, his spoon pausing midair. His eyes darted to her, sharp and searching, before he masked his expression. Amara lowered her gaze and walked away, leaving him unsettled. Another time, while serving tea in his study, she let her fingers brush the drawer where the flash drive had been hidden. "This desk must carry many secrets," she said lightly. His hand froze over his cup. The shift was subtle at first. His arrogance cracked. He began to watch her more closely, his voice less commanding, his tone uncertain. For the first time since she entered the house, Amara felt his fear. One night, he summoned her into the study. The door clicked shut behind her, the air heavy with the smell of cigar smoke. He leaned forward, his voice low. "How much do you know?" Amara's heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She tilted her head, her silence an answer in itself. He studied her, then reached for his wallet. A thick stack of Naira notes lay in his hands. He pushed it across the desk. "Take this. Forget whatever nonsense you think you've seen. Leave my business alone." The money sat between them like a test. For a girl like Amara, it was a fortune. Enough to feed her siblings for months. Enough to lift her family out of hunger. Yet, as she stared at it, she felt nothing but disgust. This was the same man who fed her scraps and called her useless. And now he thought he could buy her silence. Amara shook her head slowly. Chief Adeyemi's jaw tightened. "Be careful, girl. You don't know the weight of the fire you are playing with." But Amara did know. For the first time, she held the fire. And she had no intention of letting it go. From that night on, the balance of power shifted. She no longer cowered when the madam shouted. She no longer bent her head when the children mocked her. Slowly, carefully, she began to dictate her terms. She refused to eat scraps, she demanded proper meals. She asked for her own room in the main house, not the damp servants' quarters. And though the madam raged, though the children complained, Chief Adeyemi said nothing. His silence was her victory. But Amara's revenge was not yet complete. Power was addictive. Each day she lived in that house, she tasted more of it. And each day, she wanted more. So she began to plan. She would not just humiliate Chief Adeyemi. She would dismantle his empire from within. She would pit his wife against him, expose his secrets one by one, and make him watch as the walls of his empire crumbled. The girl who once scrubbed floors on her knees was now writing her own script. And she was only getting started. One evening, when Mrs. Adeyemi returned from a charity event, she found an unmarked envelope slipped under her bedroom door. Inside were photographs, grainy, undeniable. Her husband. Another woman. A hotel room. Her hands trembled as she stared at the evidence. Downstairs in the kitchen, Amara washed dishes, a faint smile playing on her lips. The war inside the mansion had begun. The storm inside the Adeyemi mansion did not come with thunder or rain. It came with silence. Heavy, suffocating silence that settled into the grand halls like a shadow no one could sweep away. Mrs. Adeyemi had seen the photographs. At first, she did not believe her eyes. Her husband's broad shoulders, his hand wrapped around another woman, the intimacy of hotel rooms captured in stolen frames, it was undeniable. She sat in her bedroom that night, clutching the envelope with trembling hands, rage burning through her veins. When Chief Adeyemi walked in later, humming as though the world outside could not touch him, she said nothing. But her silence was sharper than any scream. And Amara, down in the kitchen, heard the first cracks in the empire she had long dreamed of breaking. The next days unfolded like a dance of secrets. The madam of the house grew colder, more watchful, her words laced with venom. Chief Adeyemi, once arrogant, now carried himself like a hunted man. And Amara moved between them like smoke, silent, invisible, but everywhere. She served their meals, polished their silver, washed their clothes, all while feeding the flames of suspicion. She left hints where they would hurt most. A lipstick stain on his shirt pocket carefully preserved before it reached the wash. A receipt from a hotel accidentally slipped into the madam's handbag. Each discovery drove wedges deeper between husband and wife. The mansion that once glittered with wealth now echoed with tension, arguments, and mistrust. For Amara, it was not enough. Revenge was not merely about exposing secrets. It was about reclaiming dignity. About forcing those who had mocked her to bow in silence. So she pressed further. She demanded respect openly. No longer did she eat in the kitchen corner. She pulled out a chair at the dining table and served herself beside the family. Mrs. Adeyemi erupted in fury the first time, her voice sharp as a whip, but Chief Adeyemi, afraid of the evidence Amara still held, said nothing. His silence bound his wife's rage. That silence gave Amara her crown. Soon, she was no longer just a servant. She was the center of the household. The children, once cruel, now avoided her gaze. The madam, once her tormentor, seethed but obeyed. And Chief Adeyemi, the great man who commanded politicians and businessmen alike, found himself bowing to the girl who once scrubbed his floors. But power is a dangerous thing. It does not stop where you want it to. It consumes. Amara's ambitions grew darker. With every new humiliation she imposed on them, she felt years of her own humiliation wash away. She forced the family to call her by her name, not girl. She demanded new clothes, meals first served to her before anyone else, and a salary triple what she had earned. Still, she knew she was holding more than a family hostage, she was holding an empire. For on that flash drive were not only secrets of infidelity, but records of corruption that could ruin Chief Adeyemi forever. Amara understood the weight of it now. He was not merely a cruel husband, he was a thief of nations. And if she chose to, she could turn him into a scandal that would echo far beyond the marble walls of the mansion. One night, when he tried again to buy her silence with money, she refused. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice calm, steady, powerful. "I don't want your money, Chief. I want your fear." And she saw it in his eyes, that fear she had longed for. Weeks turned into months, and the Adeyemi household became a kingdom turned upside down. Yet Amara was not reckless. She played her game slowly, carefully. She leaked bits of evidence to the madam, enough to keep the marriage poisoned, but not enough to push her away. She tightened her grip on Chief Adeyemi until he could not move without glancing over his shoulder. But Amara knew true revenge would not end in the walls of that house. It had to go further. It had to destroy everything he had built. So she made her move. One morning, she slipped a package into the post, addressed anonymously to an investigative journalist known for exposing corruption. Inside were copies of contracts, bank statements, and offshore accounts. She did not reveal everything, just enough to start a fire. The scandal broke weeks later. Newspapers screamed headlines of fraud and corruption. Television stations dissected every detail. Chief Adeyemi's face, once seen at banquets and political rallies, now flashed across screens as a symbol of greed. Allies abandoned him. Contracts dissolved. His reputation crumbled. In the mansion, chaos erupted. Calls poured in, lawyers rushed in and out, journalists camped at the gates. Mrs. Adeyemi, humiliated and furious, turned her wrath on her husband. The children, once shielded, now whispered about leaving the country. And Amara? She stood in the shadows, silent, watching the empire fall. For years, she had been invisible. Now, she was the unseen hand pulling the strings. But revenge, no matter how satisfying, carries its own cost. With Chief Adeyemi disgraced, the mansion grew cold. Staff left, the gardens withered, the chandeliers dimmed. Wealth drained away like water from a broken pot. Yet Amara remained, standing in the ruins of the world that once crushed her. One night, as she stood at the balcony overlooking the empty driveway, she thought of her journey. From a girl who slept on a thin mattress, slapped and insulted, to a woman who bent one of the most powerful men in the city to her will. She thought of her siblings, no longer hungry, cared for with the money she had carefully hidden away. She thought of her mother, finally resting without worry. She had achieved what few dared to dream. She had turned humiliation into power. She had turned power into revenge. And yet, as the city lights flickered in the distance, Amara understood something deeper. Her victory was not just over Chief Adeyemi. It was over every voice that had told her she was nothing. Every hand that had struck her. Every eye that had looked through her as if she did not exist. She had made them all see. The Adeyemi mansion, once a fortress of wealth, now stood like a graveyard of pride. And in its silence, Amara reigned, not as a servant, not as a victim, but as the master. She entered their mansion as a housemaid, bowed and broken. But when the walls fell and the empire burned, Amara walked out not as the servant of the Adeyemis, but as the master of her own destiny. The housemaid's revenge was complete.